right, here we go. And happy Saturday morning here for me out in the Eastern time zone and near the Boston area. And for our guest in the Central time zone, got up a little bit earlier for us down in Texas to make sure to join us and share all the great things that he is doing and that he is going to bring to FETC. And before I call him on, and I know he can hear it in the back room, one of the things I wanted to share as I continue to just be excited and honored to welcome in guests and learn and grow and really try to refine a podcast. That the first podcast I ever was on was the Aspire podcast with our guest. And actually, before I even knew how to do anything with podcasting, I asked our guest and his partner, like, how do you do this thing? And through Anchor, started my first podcast. You can't make this shit up. And we still, I still have fun with that. That was like my practice one. But our first guest launched me into this world. So either you can thank him or curse him, because now I'm on as much as I can and really try. So want to welcome in all the way down from Texas, Josh Stamper. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning.
Well, it's my pleasure, and man. I did not realize that
I didn't
you
think
were.
you did. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to save it for that little nugget. But when I was on your podcast, I was one of the first ones. That wasn't the first one I was on,
Yeah.
but I was Mike from Canada was the one on podcast. And but yours was the first one where I was reached back out and was like, man, tell me how you do it. And your call and really being stronger together and helping me out launched the work that I do. And that's kind of what you do now with Teach Better and the work that you do. So for those out there who don't know who you are, I'd love for you to share who you are, your work, and your journey into education.
Oh my goodness, man. It's been a long and crazy journey, but it's been such a joy. I started my career as an art teacher of all places.
wow.
And I did that for 6 years. 3 years into my journey there, I had a assistant principal tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, have you ever thought about becoming a leader and becoming an administrator?" And honestly, I was just going to get a cup of coffee that morning. I didn't expect like a life-changing conversation. So I actually laughed in his face and said, "No, I'm really trying to figure out what I'm doing as a teacher and a coach." And that conversation really launched me into a master's program and deciding that was the direction I wanted to go. So had the pleasure of becoming a dean of students 6 years after. So 6 years of teaching, went into dean of students, and then a year later becoming an assistant principal and did that for 9 years. So this last summer, I made the transition to the Teach Better team as the training and development specialist. I get to have the pleasure of managing a podcast network, and I do training with schools. Obviously, I have my hands in a lot of different things there, but the main thing is to support administrators and teachers, every single day. And absolutely love the job. I love the Teach Better team, and never would have thought that this is the direction I was going. But I think some of the things that you talk about, to Stronger Together, is really where my trajectory change was. People talking through how they were getting burnt out, what they were doing to kind of help support themselves and building connections. And with those connections, that's where the podcast came from. That's where the book came from. Things like that I never in a million years thought I was going to do, but meeting other people that were doing similar things helped find passion projects for myself. And that's some of the topics that I'll be touching on at FETC.
Awesome. Well, we're going to definitely jump into FETC in a little bit, but you had mentioned your book, and you took all of that work and through EduMatch wrote Aspire to Lead. And for those who haven't had a chance to pick up the book yet, Josh's website's down below. It's on Amazon. You can pick it up a lot of different places. But share with us a little bit about the thought that went behind building that book.
Of course. So it's similar to the thought process of the podcast. I was, as an assistant principal, had an opportunity with the district to build a leadership development program. It was a cadre, and I did that for multiple years. It was so successful that the district actually took the program from us and took it on themselves. And so I was really longing for something. So I would build like one-off nights, at the district to help support folks. And the attendance was always really, really strong, even though we didn't advertise it very much. We still had a lot of folks that were just longing for information. And what I was kind of gathering was that a lot of folks didn't have support on their campus, and they were just looking to get to the next level. And so that was where the podcast really came from, was to interview people like yourself, to find great administrators, leaders in the educational space to provide wisdom for those folks. And then it started to come out that I was sharing my story more and more. And obviously, as an art teacher, it's a little bit different path than
A
some.
little bit.
So my premise is really like every educator is a leader, and it doesn't matter what position you hold, you can make an impact on a campus. And if you want to move up into administration, if I did as an art teacher, you can definitely do it wherever your position lies. So that was really just sharing a lot of stumbling blocks that were in play, what I had to prove, and kind of giving a roadmap for folks to get to that next level. I know a lot of folks aren't looking to become an administrator, but even if you're becoming a counselor or something like that, I feel like the book can still help you to lead and get to that next level.
Awesome. If you missed it on the first run, check it out. Great. It's a great look as well, and I like just the thought process behind growing and leading and supporting. What did you learn writing the book about yourself?
Well, one, that I could write a book. I think I was a terrible student for many many reasons. I had a lot of teachers speak ill will toward my success moving forward,
It is
and
tough, right?
yeah. So I had a personal goal that I really wanted to conquer those demons of saying like, no, I can do this, and I can be successful in this journey with writing a book. And so I think just being diligent, finding things that were going to make my process successful was something that I was really passionate about. And I'm proud of the work that I put into it and the product. Also, you said something about the cover. I made the cover myself. I got
Awesome.
to design that, so super like proud of that piece. But I think the reflection process was really strong too. I didn't expect that. Obviously, when you sit down for an hour every day to go through different stories and kind of reflect on what your practices were prior to, I think it just made me a stronger leader in that process. I was still an administrator when I was writing it, so what were some things that I learned and how I evolved over time, because the person I was when I first started is very different than where I ended in my administrative career.
Yeah, and I think that just shows in the work that you're doing and sharing it. I really appreciate, the openness that you have and the talking and the struggles and the things you overcome. And you do, a lot of that. I listen to your podcast, especially because it was, like I said, the one that got me started. If you don't listen, again, check out. I'm going to leave that streaming through because I see Josh has his Twitter handle already up on his name, so you can
Yeah.
follow him on Twitter there. His website's below. Talk about your podcast for those who haven't listened to that, and why is that something they should tune into?
Yeah, it's the same premise. So if you're in education, I feel like it is a podcast for you because I have a lot of guests from all through the educational field. So I try not to make it just for administrators. I want to make sure that everybody that's listening understands that the people that are on the podcast are making a difference every single day in whatever title that they hold. And I think that's something that I really am passionate about, of like, everyone is a leader in education. It doesn't matter if you're paraprofessional. uh, I know sometimes in rankings of positions you feel like, oh, I'm not doing a whole lot in my position, I can't make a difference, and that's far from the truth. I started as a paraprofessional in special education before I was a teacher, before
Uh-huh.
I did anything, and I still remember making an impact even in that space. So the podcast was built to help folks learn how to lead, and then of course level up into whatever your journey is. And so that's really the premise of it. I want to make sure that every guest that I have also gives actionable items. So I want folks to not only be able to consume the information from the podcast, but then also be able to then execute on the other end of it. It's not something that I want you to be passive about. I want you to be activating every single day. So that's really my goal within the podcast.
Yeah, and I really, again, similar to what I said about you showing your growth. I really enjoy. I listened to the last one with Frederick,
Yeah.
and just talking about the failure and overcoming it. And Dana, I've seen her work in her podcast, Out of the Trenches. And I think you had my friend Brandon Beck on, and Michael Earnshaw, guys I know, and Tisha Richmond recently. And I really like that it's practicing individuals who are sharing some of the things that are going on in real time. Because
Mhm.
and I've seen a shift in both events and in podcasts, that we're not just bringing in researchers. We're talking to people who do this every day.
Yeah.
And what has been something that you have been surprised with, like just with the success of the podcast?
Well, that's a surprise in itself. I didn't know what I was doing. I'll be honest, Matt. I it came from Todd and Saloni. I visited him at his campus. I got to watch him do a Kids Deserve It podcast
Yep.
with him and Adam Welcome. I asked him a million questions afterwards and tried to just kind of fumble around and figure it out. So I know as a podcaster, if you listen to my first episode till like the one that just came out, it's probably very different. I was very scripted before. So as far as the podcast goes, I think, just as a project in itself, I've learned a ton. But then also, just kind of like following my gut too. I felt like there was a need there,
Hmm.
and I think that it was correct. After doing this for 4.5 years, I think a lot of people have, shared what like good feedback about what they've learned and how it's affected them and in a positive way. So obviously that's affirming that, I saw something there, I built something to help that need, and it's coming to fruition. So I think for any leader, if you see a need, I think that's part of that journey is like, don't just sit there and go, oh, I wish there there was
Sure.
something that could be done. No, like how can you step up in a creative way to make that happen?
Yeah, and I think, for those of you, we'll shift to the event that's coming up in a little over a week. For those of you coming to FETC in New Orleans, you're going to hear all about this great work, and Josh is going to be sharing on Wednesday the story about not only the book, but for me about the empathy, creativity, and passion around the work that you do. So for those that are scrolling through the amazing sessions that are there and they come to you Wednesday, why are they going to come to your session? What are you going to be sharing that is going to be helping our participants?
Well, Matt, can I just say I'm so excited about this event? I know you've been there like many times, but I can't wait to meet you in person and so many
Yeah, right.
fantastic folks there. So yeah, super pumped about being at FUTC. But yeah, my session, honestly, bud, I know for myself, I was struggling with this is that we are the last few years has been really, really tough in education, and especially for our administrators. Folks are leaving profession every other day, I swear. So I really wanted to hone in on the three characteristics that I felt were important for any leader. And again, it doesn't matter your title. I do believe that you need to have empathy, creativity, and passion in your job. And so I'm going to talk through like some of the struggles that I felt personally. I try to be as transparent in my podcast, in my book, and when I speak. So
Hmm.
really going through some of the failures, some of the feelings that I was feeling as far as burnout and how I was not taking care of myself. But then also how these three characteristics kind of helped me through my journey, how to become a better leader, and hopefully on the other end, solve some of the issues of how you're feeling in regards to your balance and feeling like you can't do this every single day.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about your work in the book, and when people write about leading and leadership, you're not just talking about principles, right?
No.
For those who look through that session and see, leading or leadership, how would teachers or art teachers or other in special educators you were talking about on your last podcast, how are they going to benefit from coming to the session as well?
Yeah. So, for instance, as an art teacher, sometimes I felt like I had more power in certain situations or more influence than I did as an assistant principal,
Hmm.
because of my position, who I was able to touch, the people that I interacted with every single day. So, I think that's unfortunately, I think people think of a title as a barrier instead of an opportunity. And so, I really want to just like give characteristics and things that I did in these certain positions as an example. Hopefully, not for you to emulate and to take on yourself, but to hopefully spur some inspiration for you to be
Sure.
creative in that position that you're in. To understand that the doors can be blown off. You can do a lot more things than you anticipate, and it doesn't matter your title. You can still have an impact on the campus regardless of where you stand with your position.
Yeah, so you were talking about this as your first time going to FETC. So my first time and one of your current colleagues, her first time was the first time we had a chance to meet. So the first time I was at FETC, this was probably 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
We had a chance to meet Ray. We actually wrote an article after after that event, and we went to a tech and learning event, and it's just crazy how things happen. From that event, she went to tech and learning, and she was just there recently in Chicago and called me and was like, "Hey, thanks for." And I'm like, "That was like 6 years ago," and same today, sharing with you about the podcast, like things happen when you go to these events and you meet individuals. That's where the book Power of Connections came about, where I was at FETC, and not that one, but the one in Miami. I was like, oh my God, there's so many great people here. How can we harness this? And for you, it'll be your first one. What are you hoping to get away with? Like, going in, I know we talk about it's gonna be overwhelming, but what are some things you're looking forward to as a professional?
I love connections, Matt. I love meeting people. I love finding folks that I never heard of before. I find
Right.
out that they have amazing work, and then, learning their story. I think that's one of the things that probably I enjoy the most about the podcast is that it's almost like exercise for the mind, and that's how a conference is. You just get all this information, you learn all these folks, and you try to kind of like unpack it in the moment, and it's just too great. And I just love conference for that fact is just it's just making these fantastic connections that go well beyond the event, right?
Right.
So, I can think of a handful of folks that I consider today extremely good friends, and I wouldn't have even know that they existed except for meeting them at a conference, right? And I feel like the content is always good. That's fantastic, but really growing as a leaders to make sure that you are extending your network. And I think
Right.
conferences are probably the best way to do that.
So, where do you get your learning? You do a lot of coaching and you do a lot of supporting, but where do you grow?
Oh my goodness, a lot of different ways. I try to be a sponge as much as possible. So I mean, that could look like a book, that could be a podcast, that could be an online course, that could be meeting with folks. I do that all the time. I just you know jump on a Zoom with someone for
Hmm.
30 minutes just to figure out what they're doing, what they're all about, gain as much wisdom as possible, joining masterminds. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that I try to connect with folks because I am not the smartest person in education. Will I ever be, right? But I can surround myself with those who are, so I can gain from their experiences and what's going on. Obviously I want to make sure that I'm understanding what's relevant today,
Hmm.
so that I can help for those tomorrow. So I think those are just a few examples, but yeah, I'm always trying to find new ways to gain information. And it doesn't matter if I'm doing the dishes or if I'm taking a walk. I mean, I typically have something in my ear. I think podcasts are just a wonderful PD in your pocket opportunity. So I probably consume the most information through that.
I like it. So, as I put up before, if you're heading down to New Orleans on Wednesday at 2:45, make sure to check out Josh and his session. And also, if you're there on Wednesday after that session, it'll be opportunity to go down, grab a copy of the book, have it signed, meet Josh, grab a couple pictures. And like I said, if you hadn't had a chance to see the book, it's a great cover, great design, and great message. Website scrolling down below, visit that, see all the great work that Josh is doing. So before I get you out of here, I'm going to ask the same question I always ask. And you essentially live this model each and every day. What does stronger together mean to you?
Stronger together is just having someone's back constantly. And I think educators do a great job of this. But if you are one that's seeking guidance, reach out to someone. I know a lot of folks don't feel like they have a mentor in their life to kind of speak wisdom, but I know for a fact that if you go and you're connected on social media, you could reach out to a guy like Matt or myself and just ask for time. And I know that there's so many educators out there that would be willing to help and to coach, to mentor, wherever you are in your position. So I think that's the best way. Stronger together is just having someone's back, regardless of if you know them for 5 minutes or you know them for a lifetime. I think so many folks are willing and able to help and support. And if you're one to be able to coach someone and be there for them, just stepping up and making that happen.
Absolutely, and I think that just shows the real impact. And like you said, we've never met in person, but I started podcasting because of your support. And I think at these events, these are the things that happen. So, Josh, thanks for getting up early, jumping on, sharing some of your work, and I look forward to seeing you down in New Orleans, getting our first picture together, and meeting in person. And
Can't wait.
so, thanks for jumping on, and for all of our listeners and viewers out there, either we'll see you in New Orleans or check out Josh's work on his website. And remember, we always stay stronger together when we put we over me. Have a great weekend, Josh.
You too.